Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series. My maladies are acting up today, so sorry about that. I basically say that every week, so maybe one day I'll be back to normal. Today's lecture is sponsored by Anonymous. Anonymous sponsors a lot of lectures, so thanks to Ted Danson again. This lecture is on the King's Indian attack, which is similar to the King's Indian, except King's Indian attack is played by white. And typically, not always, but especially in this lecture, white plays the King's Indian attack against specific pawn structure for black that was popularized by Fischer, as was pointed out by the sponsor. The sponsor wrote a manifesto about what they wanted to look at in the opening. I'm not sure what I should read, but I think I'm going to read the bullet points of what the sponsor wanted and talk about the bullet points before we talk about the games. And I don't necessarily agree with the sponsor, but usually I do because they're the sponsor. So the sponsor has rights. Okay, so as you can see from the Wikipedia article on the King's Indian attack, white's pawn structure and piece placement is more important than black's because white's playing the King's Indian attack. And sometimes, if you're reading a chess book or a magazine, if those things still exist, if you don't know what a book or a magazine is, it's the internet on trees. A lot of times it's abbreviated KIA, because King's Indian attack is a lot of letters, so KIA is easier. So if you think you're car shopping and you're going to buy a Kia, it could be the King's Indian attack. And the King's Indian attack at the top level nowadays is about as popular as a Kia. Oh, snap. Okay, so that was like two jokes. Okay, so the diagram here, which I'm highlighting in blue, which makes you not be able to see the diagram. That's good. That's good teaching. That's the typical white piece placement in the King's Indian attack. Not necessarily what black is doing in the King's Indian. And the reason is, in the King's Indian, with black playing the King's Indian, which is more common, white can do a lot of different stuff. And most people, not everybody, who plays the King's Indian attack like to do it when black has played an early e6, which we will discuss as I look at the games. Okay, so let me read the bullet points of the sponsor and answer those questions as best as I can. The consequences for white regarding move order, and I was thinking about that before I read the bullet point earlier, starting with either knight f3 on move 1 or e4. My impression is that starting with knight f3 has recently become more popular than e4, but I'm not sure if that's correct or if there's any real advantage. And I have to say, I think it's the opposite. I think to be a correct King's Indian attack, the way I want to play it, white typically would start with e4 first, because if white starts with knight f3, then white's going to have some issues against certain move orders where black isn't playing e6 and blocking the bishop on c8, which, again, we're going to discuss when I get a board up. Okay, the main attacking plans for white in the middle game. That's a bullet point. Talk about that in the lecture. Why the opening has fallen out of fashion in recent years. Typically, openings fall out of fashion due to the fact that the world champion at the time plays or doesn't play the opening. So when world champions start playing openings, they become popular again. And falling out of fashion doesn't mean it's bad or we found something wrong with it. One of the problems of the King's Indian attack is to get the positions that you want that are theory that give white an attack, black has to sort of cooperate. And Fischer himself, in my 60 memorable games, where he has at least one King's Indian attack, that was one of my favorite games growing up as a kid, because that was one of my favorite books. And it actually is the first game we're going to look at. He said he only plays the King's Indian attack if black plays e6 early. Otherwise, black is flexible and could do other stuff that he thought gave black reasonable position. And the other reason it's fallen out of fashion is very confusing. I'm going to confuse you now, which is my job as a chess coach. For example, another opening that has fallen out of fashion is the King's Gambit. So I guess if an opening has the word kings in it, it's out of fashion. And the reason the King's Gambit is out of fashion is top players typically don't want to put all their eggs in one basket, especially if they're vegan, like me. So when you play the King's Indian attack and you look at games of Fischer and more recent games, which we're also going to look at, typically white's attacking on the king's side and black is getting a lot of space and initiative on the queen's side. And then Fischer usually believed in those kinds of positions, which he would often get from Sicilians, open Sicilians, that favored the side that was attacking the king. And a lot of grandmasters don't want to give their opponent a free hand on one side of the board so that they have a free hand on the other side of the board. They want to have more control. And the King's Gambit, it's sort of, rock'em sock'em chess, which is fun if you're a club player, but if you're a grandmaster, you feel like you've lost control. And if some of you have been watching Norway chess, which I guess has been over for 2 weeks for people who are watching on YouTube, if you're watching live, as I'm doing the lecture now, which some people are, that's going on now. And as of now, although I didn't see today's result, Magnus has lost 4 games. And the difference in Magnus's game from his typical game is he's lost control. He's getting wild and crazy positions where anything can happen. And he's doing that on purpose because he started out badly in the tournament and he has to win games. He can't draw half his games and win half his games because he's already lost half his games. So he has to win a lot of games. So he has to get positions where his opponents are going to make mistakes. And since Magnus has never been so old, this is the oldest Magnus has ever been. A year ago, Magnus was younger. Also, a year ago, Magnus didn't have a kid. And 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Magnus didn't have a wife. So Magnus's life has changed. He's getting older, started out badly, and it's sort of domino effect of him losing a lot of games. He's not in control of the games like he usually is. When you think of Magnus, you think of winning equal end games, not you're confused by the position, you don't know who's better, and then all of a sudden Magnus wins. That's more like Shirov and Morozevich and Shabalov and those Larson, those kinds of players. So King's Indian attack gives black a free hand on the queen's side, which you're going to see in the games. And Fischer didn't care about that very much. And since Fischer was the world champion and he was the best player in the world before he was the world champion, when he played an opening, people started to emulate it because, Fischer played it. then Fischer stopped playing chess pretty early in his career, before he was 30. And then a lot of grandmasters weren't playing it, and it fell out of favor. It's not considered with perfect play to give white, a winning position, but no opening is. And then common mistakes by white that lead to an attack fizzling out. Again, we'll look at that. I think when white spends too much time focusing on the queen side, then the attack can fizzle out. Or if white's pawns get stuck, which we'll see in the games. Anyway, the Wikipedia article, it isn't too good, but King's Indian attack, it has an article on the opening, and a lot of openings it doesn't have articles. It has variations in the article, so that's not that bad. I guess one of the best things about the Wikipedia article for the club player is there's a bibliography. So if you're interested in buying books on the King's Indian attack, there's a list of them here. Though I probably wouldn't buy the one from 1988, but maybe. Ken Smith and John Hall, very suspicious. Okay, probably buy a book by grandmasters written more recently. Looks like the most recent book, according to Wikipedia, was written by Victor Bulligan, who's sometimes called VRL Bulligan. I don't know why he has two first names. Winning with the King's Indian Attack, published by ChessBase. So that's not bad. Okay. Well, of course, the games speak for themselves, and I know Hans is a big fan of my lectures, except for one thing, and so we have to have the chess speak for itself. Now, of course, when the sponsor wanted me to look at the King's Indian attack, first game I thought of was Fischer's game with Myagmarsuren from the Interzonal in '67, because that's the game that I saw when I was a kid. I didn't see it live. I wasn't born yet. I had a good excuse. But I saw it in my 60 Memorable Games and famous game. Of course, the sponsor doesn't want me to show just Fischer games, because those games are from the 60s and things have happened in the opening since. So we have a couple of more recent games, which we're going to look at. Okay, now, I don't want the lecture to go too long, but I only have 3 games today because I wanted to talk about stuff that's related to the opening that'll give you a better handle of what's going on. Okay, so first, we're going to talk about the King's Indian, the regular King's Indian, confusing the sponsor. Sponsor's like, I don't want to talk about the King's Indian. I want to talk about the King's Indian attack. And the King's Indian, the 2 most common ways for white to play are the classical with e4, and then usually, but not always, knight f3 and bishop e2, and typically black plays e5. Okay, other way for white to play is to play g3. Okay, and if you are fans of chess from the 60s, there's matches between Mikhail Tal and Mikhail Botvinnik, the Mikhails, where Botvinnik Tal got this variation of the King's Indian a lot, which has sort of fallen out of favor, but people still play it with white. One of my worst losses in a King's Indian with black was in this position. I played very badly about 6 years ago in Foxwoods. I got completely crushed by an IM. So this is a popular line for white, and even more popular is e4. Now imagine a universe where white always plays e3, and that universe isn't this one. Okay, but we can imagine, for the sake of argument, now we're going to get King's Indian attack positions where black's playing the King's Indian, but it looks like a King's Indian attack because white played e3, which is the same as black playing e6. And this is why Bobby Fischer, when he played the King's Indian attack, he made sure his opponents played e6 before he played it, because nobody's playing this with white. So if black is playing e6 early before white plays the King's Indian attack, the King's Indian attack makes sense because e6 for black and e3 for white is very passive. In the King's Indian, the regular one, this one, white doesn't play e3. If white played e3, then this is a King's Indian attack with an extra tempo for white. And nobody plays like this with white because nobody wants to play e3 and block their bishop on c1. That just, I mean, you could play e4. Why would you play e3 instead of e4? e4 gains more space and bishop on c1 can get out. Okay. And Fischer pointed this out, that he only played the King's Indian attack if black played e6. Now, there's two ways for black to play e6. Of course, if black doesn't play e6, then typically grandmasters won't play the King's Indian attack because they don't think it gives white anything. They think white gets a better chance to attack when black is playing passively. And that's one of the reasons people aren't playing the King's Indian attack with white much anymore, as opposed to fashion, just pointed out by the sponsor. Other reason is people aren't playing e6 as much. The French defense, which I played as a kid, is not played very often at the top level. Although I think Pragyananda beat Magnus with it yesterday. It's like a surprise weapon. And what's funny about the French defense is one of its greatest defenders says it's terrible. He completely changed his mind. The truth hurts. And that person is Yasser Seirawan. In the 70s and 80s, Yasser Seirawan played the French defense and the Caro-Kann. And the last 20 years, Seirawan says the French defense, that's terrible. So, man, the truth hurts. Okay, so if Fischer was alive today and he wasn't, in his 80s, and he was young and strong at chess, and he still played the King's Indian attack, then he would probably only play it against e6 Sicilian. Okay, and in Fischer's game with Myagmarsuren played e6. And people don't play the French defense much anymore. And a lot of grandmasters are like, if my opponent plays the French defense, why am I playing the King's Indian attack? Why am I not playing d4? D4 is the most natural looking move. And white's considered to get an advantage in most of the main lines of the French. So the other way to play the King's Indian attack is against e6. And I don't know how popular this was in the 60s and 70s, but nowadays, e6 isn't played very often. People are playing the Najdorf, the most common. Occasionally they're playing the Dragon. I play the classical Sicilian with black, so I don't play e6. But after e6, Fischer was gung-ho about playing the King's Indian attack. d3, knight d2, g3, bishop g2, like the Wikipedia article said. Okay, so first we'll look at the game Fischer-Myagmarsuren. Now, another thing you guys don't know about Fischer, since Fischer's been dead for like 15, 20 years, is Fischer did not like facing the French defense. So one of the reasons Fischer started playing King's Indian attack was when he played regular French defense, d4, d5, and then whatever he played. He was white in a Winnow. He was white in McCutcheons. He was white in, other variations, classical French. He didn't do well. And he has a famous loss with white against an IM where the guy prepared for him. It was the same line from the famous game Fischer-Finegold, 1963, confusing the Polgar family. If you can confuse the Polgar family, you're doing something right. So the first time, not the first time, one time I played Judith Polgar. I've actually played her several times in different continents. I forgot what the results were. But anyway, Judith Polgar, when I played her at the beginning of our careers, they didn't have like supercomputers and you prepared. And what she did is she had printouts. She would print out games from her opponents and bring them to tournaments. So she had these pieces of paper, probably old style computer printers, that before you guys were born. Okay. And after she beat me one game, she said, "Ben, I have a question about your games." Because she had a printout of my games. She said, "What's this game you played Fischer in 1963? Because she didn't think I was that old. But it said Fischer-Finegold. And I said, "That's my dad. He played Fischer in 1963, and it was a French defense." Okay, and the line that Fischer played against the Winnow, which is not very common right now, super grandmasters typically play knight f6 here. But bishop b4 is the Winnow, and Fischer, instead of playing e5, which every grandmaster plays, every game ever played, Fischer played a3. And this is my dad's game with Fischer, and this is a famous game that Fischer lost to Kovacevic, which you guys can look up on the internet when this lecture is over. Or you can pause the lecture if you're watching on YouTube and look up Fischer Kovacevic or Kovacevic. And Fischer got crushed. God damn. Okay, so Fischer didn't always want to play, the most common theoretical lines because he wasn't doing well. And he was doing well, as the sponsor pointed out, with the King's Indian attack. And a game that I'll never find, and I forgot who had black, one of my coaches from before you guys were born was Kentucky Grandmaster Gregory Kaidanov. And I saw him play the King's Indian attack, just like Fischer did, the same style, and checkmate his opponent in like 22 moves in a tournament in Ohio against like a 2300. I was really impressed. But the game's not published anywhere because it's an open tournament. Okay, so Fischer played d3 against Myagmarsuren. d5, knight d2. And this was the common move order, which the sponsor thinks may not be the most common move order now. But if you look at the top level in slow tournaments, there's not a lot of games in the King's Indian attack right now. And typically what the super GMs do, since most tournaments are now blitz and rapid, unfortunately, like slow chess is like the dodo bird. Slow chess is going away. You'll see all kinds of openings when the time control speeds up. Okay, and basically in some move order or another, white plays knight f3, g3, bishop g2, castles, and then plays for a kingside attack. And white's playing the King's Indian, which usually black plays, and black is playing an early e6, which is the equivalent of white playing e3, which I showed you about 10 minutes ago. And white doesn't play e3 against the King's Indian. So since black's already played e6, because it wasn't a King's Indian yet, then white's happy that black isn't playing e5, and black isn't playing bishop g4, and so forth. And if black fianchettos his bishop, then he's putting all his pawns on white squares, and his white squared bishop on c8 doesn't look very good. Okay, so they developed their pieces, and black played on the queen side. And there's dozens and dozens of games that started this way, one way or the other. And as the sponsor pointed out, white could have played knight f3 on move 1, and we get the same position. Sometimes white plays knight f3 before g3. Sometimes white plays g3, as in this game, before knight f3, and you get the same kind of position. Okay, and basically, Fischer sort of invented the idea of playing e5, h4, maneuvering the knight over to the king side, and throwing all the king side pieces at black, and winning brilliantly. And this is his most brilliant win, in my opinion, in this opening. Okay, so he played e5, knight goes to d7. Now, white's going to play on the king side, and black is going to push all the queen side pawns. Rook e1, the pawns attacked. Don't forget to play chess when you're playing chess. Don't just blindly play h4 and be like, oh, my pawn's attacked. I didn't see that. Okay, so rook e1. Now, rook e1 does two things. It defends the pawn, obviously, and frankly, and it vacates the f1 square for the white knight to come over to the king side. And if you look at openings like the Ruy Lopez, white playing rook e1, knight f1, very common. Same kind of idea. Okay, black plays b5. Black has a free hand on the queen side. Knight f1, as I indicated. b4. Black could also play a5, but black had other uses of the a5 square. h4, put it in h. a5. Black is playing on the queen side. Bishop f4. That defends the pawn again. So now the knight isn't tied down to the pawn, which it was because the pawn was under attack. And white might want to play knight g5 later and start sacking. Also, it's good to develop your pieces. Bishop f4, developing the piece, keeping e5 protected. a4, black has a free hand on the queen side. Now, if you ask an engine, hey engine, well, who's better? Engine says it's about equal. But that's because when you're checkmating an engine, the engine defends checkmate. It sees all the attacks, it sees all the possibilities, calculates better than you, and it doesn't get checkmated. So if you're attacking an engine, it doesn't get checkmated. It sees all the checkmates and doesn't let you do them. If you're playing a human, and Fischer said, if you're attacking on the king side and your opponent's attacking on the queen side, the king side will win. Because queen side, okay, you get a pawn or you promote or something, but king side checkmate. Checkmate's better than positional play on the queen side, according to Fischer. Okay, Fischer played a3. He's trying to stop black from continue to push all his pawns up. Takes. Now black has a b file. Black played knight a5. I think some annotators don't like that move, and some said it was okay. I haven't looked at the game in a long time. When I was a little kid, I looked at it like every day. Okay, so black wants to push pawns, keep pushing pawns. Okay, knight e3. Now, white could play knight h2 to go to g4 instead of knight e3, but white has another knight that can go to h2. So white's knights have a lot of squares on the king side to go to. Okay, bishop a6. Black's ready to push the pawns. Bishop h3, getting the king side attack going. d4, attacking the knight. And the knight went back to f1. Fischer said, hey, you played d4. weakening c4 and e4. I want my knights to go to c4 and e4. I want to go to those squares because my knight on g4 just blocks my bishop. So knight f1 is a pretty positional move. The knight wants to go to e4. Okay, knight b6. Black wants to play c4, knight d5, and knight c3. Knight g5. Fischer wants to play queen h5, confusing the audience. This knight can also go to e4. So obviously white's attacking on the king's side, black's attacking on the queen's side. That's very interesting for the spectators. And this is why a lot of people don't like slow chess as much anymore. Too many draws. There's been millions of chess games played. Grandmasters looked at all of those games. They found the right way to play. And then they get these positions on move 25 that are still in their prep. And then the game ends in a draw because the engine says it's equal. But in blitz chess and rapid chess, they play more funky openings, get more interesting games. And right now, because all the best players in the world, with a few exceptions, Nakamura, Caruana, Carlsen, but the only exceptions, are in their 20s or teens. And so those guys play crazy and play to win. So Norway chess has a lot of decisive games because the players are young and they're trying to win. Vincent Kamer, Pragdanandha, Arjun's pretty young. Abdu Satorov's pretty young. Sindarov's pretty young. So those guys play for a win. They play like Fischer did. Okay, give the guy the queen side, get the king side, and try to win. Okay, knight d5. The knight's good on d5. Bishop went back to d2. Bishop's not good on f4, but the knight's going to take it. Then Myagmarsuren took the knight on g5. Probably that's a mistake, giving up the two bishops. Bishop takes. Queen d7. Queen h5. White's attacking. White can move the rook up. White can play knight d2 to e4 to f6. White can sacrifice. White can play f4, f5. Big attack for white. Black's pieces are all on the queen side. Rook c8. Knight d2. The knight's going to e4. Knight c3. If you play knight e4, I'll take it. And bishop f6. Always play bishop f6. Or is that bishop f8? Okay, so Fischer said, all your pieces are here, so I'm going to attack on the king's side, sacrifice a piece, and play for mate. Queen e8 was played. White's going to play queen g5 and give checkmate. So black's going to play queen e8 to f8. Black was too afraid to take because white's threatening mate, and white has rook e5, and white has knight f3 to g5. Very suspicious. Occasionally there's a sacrifice on e6. That's good. So queen e8 is the safest, keeping the pawns in front of the king. Knight e4. g6, attacking the queen. I think that move loses. Queen g5. White's pieces are all attacking black's king. Black's queen side play is too slow. c4, too late. h5, putting it in h. Takes. Rook h4. White's attacking on the king side. Rook a7. So after takes, black wants to take with the f pawn, and the rook defends h7. Otherwise, I could sack my rook, and my queen could come in with mate. I'll give you an example. Let's play, I don't know, d2. Takes, takes, rook takes h7, queen h4 check, queen check, and checkmate. For example, obviously black's queenside pieces aren't defending the king. Okay, so rook a7, that defends the king. Now you can take with the f pawn and the rook defends h7. Bishop g2. That's the star move of the game. Fischer wants the bishop to go to e4 to give attack against the king. Takes on c2. Queen h6. Threatening queen g7 mate with advantage. Queen f8. And now you're probably wondering, why did Fischer play bishop g2? Well, now you're going to find out. And if Trying to Learn was watching this live, and he is, although sometimes he steps away from the computer, then this will be his favorite thing ever. It used to be getting $1 million bonus checks from work was his favorite thing ever. But now this is. Queen takes h7 check, confusing the audience, but not confusing Fischer. And then black resigned, which is terrible, because we want to see checkmate. We're furious. King takes, double check. If king g8, then rook h8 mate, as in the game Finegold Balashov. And if king takes g6, bishop e4 mate. The point of bishop g2. Fischer saw the queen sacrifice before he played bishop g2. So a lot of modern players that are sort of boring, which isn't the young guys, but the older guys, they don't want to play chess like this, because what if you miscalculate? What if your attack doesn't work? Then black gets queens on the queen side. Black completely won on the queen side, and white completely won on the king side. That's exciting for the fans. Then the better player wins because he outcalculates his opponent. And unfortunately, players like Magnus didn't play this way typically for their career, except when Magnus was younger, he did sacrifice more. And so now some of the younger players can beat Magnus by getting these kinds of games and getting wild positions, and Magnus isn't comfortable, wants to be comfortable. Fischer typically wants to be comfortable, but some of his great attacking games, great calculation. Okay, now the sponsor also wanted to see more modern players. So here's a game, Nakamura Kovalenko, where they actually got into an ending where Nakamura took over on the queen side after he took over on the king side. Karpov would be proud. Nakamura played g3, confusing the sponsor. Sponsors like g3, what about knight f3 and e4? Okay, and black played e6. So a lot of times, Nakamura will play double fianchetto or c4 or something like that, or even reverse Dutch. But since black played e6 early, he's going to play a King's Indian attack because, you know, that's a good way to play against e6. And this is the Fischer Myagmarsuren game by transposition. Same position. Okay. This is still the Fischer game. h4. Okay, and Myagmarsuren played b4 before he played a5. Played b4, b4. But he played a5 the next move, so good transpose. And Nakamura played h5, putting in an h, because that's how we play chess nowadays. We move our h pawn. Nakamura wants to play h6. Black has to make a decision on whether to play h6 or not. Black decided not to, and Nakamura played h6. Black doesn't want to destroy his king side, so he played g6. Nakamura played knight f1, just like Fischer. Bishop a6, knight h2, instead of what Fischer did, which was knight e3. Doesn't want to block his bishop. a4, a3, just like Fischer did. They traded. Similar position. Rook e8. Black wants one of his minor pieces to come defend the king. Knight g4. Knight d4. Bishop f4, just like Fischer. c3, kicking the knight out. And black is just very passive on the king side. And white's pawns are in such a way that if black plays d4, white can play c4. And if black plays c4, white can play d4. And if black doesn't do anything, eventually white's going to play bishop g5, queen f4, and come in on the dark squares like Fischer did. So he played d4 because Kovalenko realized that typically in the King's Indian attack, if you get to an endgame, you don't get checkmated. So he wanted to get to an endgame, but unfortunately, all of black's pieces suck. That's a critical term in chess. Your pieces suck. All of black's minor pieces can't move anywhere. He has no space. Okay, and black hasn't won on the queen side. There's a fight for the b file. We're fighting. And white's bishop on f3, that's a good bishop. So rook b8, bishop d1, attacking the pawn on a4, not easy to defend. Knight b6, defending. Bishop a5. Nakamura says, I'm going to win that pawn. King f8, always play king f8. f4, gaining more space. Black has no space. Now, Nakamura takes the b file. He puts his knight back on e4. Tries to. They trade everything. And white has the b file. Knight's coming to f6. So king e7. Bishop f3. Getting rid of black's only good piece. Now white's strategically winning. White has knight f6. White has knight e4. White's got knight d6. The a pawn is weak. The c pawn is weak. And black is all in his first rank. Game didn't take much longer. They maneuvered around a lot. Got to defend the h pawn. Can't let him get a past h pawn. Now you got to defend the c pawn. White's king moves up like Nigel Short, just like in my lecture last week. King g5. Move it on up to the king side. And this is a funny game because usually in a King's Indian attack, white tries to checkmate black, but white is like checkmating black without the checkmate. Black is like in stalemate. Black can't move anything. Black is just trapped. White's just having fun. Nakamura's just having a good time attacking all of black's weak pawns. And that does it. You can't defend all your weak pawns now. And then there was a tactic at the end, which again, trying to learn is going to enjoy. f7. And now knight e6. That's a very nice tactic. And obviously, Nakamura good at tactics. And then black didn't resign because then you would be confused. So black showed you why they resigned next move. Rook takes, knight d8 check. So black completely got crushed on the king's side and the queen's side and was stuck on the back rows because white got this nice pawn on h6. And I lost a blitz game to Nakamura about 15 years ago in a blitz tournament. And Nakamura played h4, h5, h6 in a different opening. And he told me I should have played h6. Don't let him play h6. I think the same could have been said for black in this game. Black's king side was too weak. His pawns on the king side were weak. Didn't have any space. His king was trapped. And eventually, white busted through on the king side. Okay, last but not least, and again, the sponsor was interested in more recent games. Here's the game Karjakin Shankland from the FIDE World Cup a few years ago. Okay, this started as a French defense. This is the same as Fischer's game, the same starting way of playing, except Fischer played G3. But they transpose. And Shankland played A5. The sponsor was interested in how black would play differently than in the 1960s when Fischer was beating everybody. Well, Shankland is an opening theoretician, and he decided to play A5 instead of C5. They could transpose. Black could play C5 and B5 later. But he's playing A5, A4, because that's how you play chess in the 2020s. Play H4, H5, H6. Black plays A5, A4, A3. That's how we play chess nowadays. Okay, and Karjakin played A3 and said no A3 for you. And it looks pretty similar, assuming black plays B5 at some point. Okay, and instead of playing E5 right away and then rook E1, Karjakin played rook E1 in this position. Now, this is a very important tournament. This is the FIDE World Cup. So if Karjakin is playing King's Indian attack in the World Cup, you know it's a sound opening. Castles, E5, knight D7, knight F1, and then B5 would just transpose to like the other games. Okay, H4. Okay, bishop B7. I think if black played B4, that would look more like the other games. But Shankland played bishop B7. H5. Is black going to play H6, or is black going to allow H6? Black played H6. I think that's correct. I don't think you want white to play H6. Bishop F4. These games all look the same, and white's always winning. That's good for the sponsor. Queen B6. Queen D2. Here comes the shack attack. Rook C8. That frees the F8 square for the bishop or the knight in case white sacrifices. G4. Here comes G5. And black hasn't played B4 and D4 and C4 and knight A5 and bishop A6. Black hasn't done anything. Black is just building up, and he's not stopping white from pushing the H and G pawns. It seems like white's attack is quicker. Queen D8, very defensive move, trying to stop G5. Knight H2, Rook A6, King H1. Karjakin wants to play Rook G1, attack on the G line. B4, Rook G1, Knight F8, then D4. White solidifies the center. Bishop on B7 is terrible. Now, show this position to any grandmaster, and they're not going to like black. Black doesn't have enough play on the queen side. White's dominating in the center with the D4 and E5 pawns. White's dominating on the king side. White's going to play G5 soon. Maybe preface it with bishop F1. Always play bishop F1, attacking the rook on A6. Then the bishop can go to D3. We'll call that the Fischer diagonal. Fischer's bishop went to E4, but same diagonal. Okay, knight A5. The knight wants to go to C4. G5. Here comes the shack attack. White's breaking through on the king side. Bishop F1, as espoused by me. Now the rook is on the G line. Queen H6, H6. Knight G5, Knight G4. Big attack. A3, black's breaking through on the queen side. But as we're going to see, Fischer was right. Attacking on the king side is worth more than attacking on the queen side. Rook takes G7 check. You will know my name is the Lord. I'll bet you Shankland didn't see that coming. Obviously, King H8, Queen H6 is mate, so there's not much to calculate. You have to take the rook. Knight G4, threatening Queen H6 check. So if black plays a random move, there's Queen H6 check, and then Knight F6. Or Knight G5. I think Knight F6 is better. f5, so the king has some place to escape. Takes, winning the queen. Takes on b2, threatening all of white's pieces. Black has broken through, but white just plays queen g5 check. King f7, h6, ignoring the rook on a1 because white's threatening queen g7 mate. Queen g7 mate's hard to stop. Played knight g6, that stops it. Knight h4, threatening queen takes knight check. If knight takes knight, queen g7's mate again. So he makes a queen. Karjakin calculates pretty well. Now, if you play king d8, queen d7 mate. If you play king d6, queen d7 mate again. Truth hurts. And Shankland, being a good sport, played in the checkmate. Obviously, that was a cutting edge game on this line. White broke through on the king side. Black broke through on the queen side. And then as Fischer said, white checkmates black. And black gets a queen. So a brilliant game from Karjakin in a very important tournament, the World Cup. And as a consequence, Karjakin, a few years ago, he was playing for the World Championship and he was tying it up 6-6. So Karjakin's pretty good. So if Karjakin and Nakamura can play the King's Indian attack and win against Grandmasters and against a 2700 player in the World Cup, then you, a club player at home, obviously is good enough for you. And you have to break through on the King's side, get big attacks, and if you can calculate as well as Karjakin, okay, maybe you can't calculate that well, but you can calculate better than Shankland. So at least you got something. Then you can win too. I want to thank our sponsor for this brilliant idea for a lecture, the King's Indian attack. It's not played that often, which is actually good. When I'm trying to learn a new opening, I don't want there to be a million Grandmaster games from 6 months ago. I want there to be games from the 60s and 70s, and my opponents weren't born yet. They never saw those games. That's what I'm looking for. If you're playing a 10-year-old, they're not going to know the King's Indian attack because nobody plays that now. Then you can play it, and you'll checkmate them, and they'll be like, why did I get checkmated? And the truth hurts. I want to thank our sponsor, Anonymous. If you want to sponsor a lecture, look in the description, and you can find my wife's details, Karen Boyd, and you can contact her. We have lectures set up for the next 2 months. There's going to be a break in lectures in June and July, for a little of July anyway, not for much, because we're going to Vegas for the World Series of Poker, and I'm going for the National Open. So next week I'll be in Vegas for the National Open, and I won't be doing a lecture. Then I'll come back from Vegas and do a lecture. Then I'll go back to Vegas. So hopefully, when I give my simultaneous exhibition in Vegas, I can play some King's Indian attacks, and my opponents will be confused. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks to the sponsor. Bye.